The reason I lived in Barcelona or live in Barcelona for so long is that I got robbed. You're talking about serendipity, right? I was on my way to Sevilla. I think I've told this story before, so I'll keep it very short. But my plan was, I was probably roughly your age, and I was living in San Francisco with a girlfriend, and it was kind of weird because she was a stripper, and I didn't know she was a stripper until I'd already arrived, and then she told me, and then I'm like, what the fuck? You could have told me on the phone when I called you from Paris. Instead, was waiting for me to show up with all my stuff, and anyway, long story. But so that relationship wasn't really working out, and the only reason I was in the States was to be with her. So I'm like, okay, what am I going to do? So I had already been to Asia, and I really wanted to keep traveling. So my plan was, this was 89, I think, and the Aung San Suu Kyi had just won the Nobel Peace Prize, the Burmese independence, and there were all these, countries were boycotting Burmese oil, and the military dictatorship was toppling. It was about to go down. So I got one of those teaching certificates teaching English. When you don't know the native language,
right.
So I got one of those in San Francisco, and then my plan was go to Sevilla and hang out in Sevilla, teach English, practice teaching English, learn some Spanish, make some friends, because I had been traveling so much, I hadn't really had friends for a while,
Right.
And sort of stay there for a little while and wait for the Burmese government to fall. And then once the government falls, pack up my shit, go to Hungary, and get the Trans-Siberian Railroad from Budapest to Beijing, which costs like $400 or something. Mm-hmm. It's like super cheap. It was like 14 days, 15 days or something on a train. But I wanted to do that because you have to take all your own food on the train, and you're just like camping on a train for 2 weeks, Cool. And then I was going to go from Beijing down into Burma and be like one of the first Westerners in Burma since World War II,
Wow.
Really, except for a very controlled tourism. That was my plan. So I flew into Paris where my buddy was living, hung out with him for a little bit, and then I thought, well, instead of just flying to Sevilla, I'll take a bus to Barcelona and then over to Madrid, spend a couple days in each of the cities, get to know it a little bit, and then go to Sevilla and start my life, right? I had like $5,000 saved up or something, seed money. And I got to Barcelona, and the first night in Barcelona, someone distracted me and stole my bag. And, I had a journal in there that I'd been writing in for like 3 years.
Brutal.
Yeah, that's what hurt.
That really does.
But they got a passport. And it was these fucking skinheads, man. There were all these skinheads hanging out. And so I knew who did it.
It wasn't like a violent mugging. It was
no. There are no violent muggings, really.
Deal.
No, it's just they distract you. And I had a shoulder bag, and stupidly I had it sitting next to me on the bench. It wasn't wrapped around my body, and there wasn't even money. There was like a camera, my passport, the journal. I think that's it.
Like photos and journals are the most valuable thing to me.
And it's before digital, so it wasn't like it's not in the cloud or whatever. Yeah, it was weird. I mean, the good side is you mentioned earlier, like, with Facebook, you can keep in touch with people you run into. I had met this dude. I was in northern Mexico. I did this trip, like a long trip started in El Paso down into Guatemala, all overland through Mexico and Guatemala. Is like 9 months, something like that. Wow. That's the one that ended with me. Well, that included me getting stung by a scorpion while I was tripping on the Jaguar Temple in Tikal. That was one of the highlights of my travel life. But on that trip, I went to the Barranca del Cobre, which is Copper Canyon. It's deeper and bigger than the Grand Canyon. It's in northern Mexico. And so I went down to the bottom to this little town called Bato Pilas, which you can't go to now because it's all drug gangs and, impossible to travel there. But have you read the book Born to Run?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's where he is, the Tarahumara.
Yeah.
So I went down to this little town, Batu Pilas, which was on the river, and then I hiked up the river back into this canyon, and there's the Lost Cathedral. And it was this Spanish church that had been built in the 1600s, I guess. But now there's like no town. There's nothing there. There are a couple shacks that Indians live in, and it's the ruins of this Spanish church. So I hiked back to this thing. I came around the corner, and I saw there was this dude sitting up on the roof of this church. I'm like, wow, how the fuck did he get up there? So I hiked down to the church, and I go in, and I saw there were these rocks you could climb up, and then there was like this, like a log that you could sort of like shimmy up and work your way around. So I go up on this roof, and of course I'm feeling like I don't want to crowd this dude, like he's got this amazing spot, but I want to get up there. So I get up there, and he's really friendly, and I come over, and we talk, and he's a Spanish guy, Marcos Beascoa, and he gave me his sister's phone number in Barcelona. And he said, because he was traveling, he's like, I don't have a house, I don't have a phone number, but if you're ever in Barcelona, call my sister if I'm in town, whatever. Awesome. So I get robbed. I've got to wait for a new passport, which is 10 days or something. So I'm like, wait, don't I have that guy's number somewhere? I call him up, and he ends up being one of my best friends to this day.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And he shows me all around, shows me his favorite places, introduces me to all his friends. I start meeting all these women, and someone offers me a job, and someone else says, hey, I've got a spare room. You want to rent a room in my place, whatever. And I'll teach you Spanish. And it's like, wow, what the fuck? So suddenly, 20 years later, I'm still living in Barcelona.
Right on. That's a cool synchronicity
So that
story.
shit happens,
Yeah.
It's, yeah. And I went back to the skinheads, and I tried to get them to sell me back my journal. They didn't like that. And so then they started harassing me and fucking with me. And I'm staying in this pension on Plaza Real, it's called, down at the base of the Ramblas. And it was really sketchy in those days. This is before the Olympics, where they cleaned everything up. And the port, which now is like really nice and where all the tourists go, that used to be junkies and
ghetto.
Yeah, really, and so these two American soldiers show up in the pension. I'm staying in the dorm, the cheap beds with everybody, and these guys were on like a week R&R from Iraq. It's the first Iraq war, and they just like, hey, American, hey, yeah, American dude. And like, these are not the kind of dudes I would ever know or hang out with, you know, but just the fact that I was American made them love me.
Right.
And they didn't speak any Spanish, and neither did I really, but they, so I told them about some pizzeria that I liked, and they're like, come with us, dude. So I ended up telling them the story, and then we go back to the plaza, and there are those skinheads. And these dudes are like, are they the people that are fucking with you? I was like, yeah, whatever. And these two dudes just walked over and started like, what the fuck? You're fucking with an American? You don't fuck with it. And these skinheads are like, whoa. And they all get up, and they've all got knives and shit. Like, oh no, what's happening? These two dudes just like beat the fuck out of like 8 skinheads in about 20 seconds. It was like a Arnold Schwarzenegger movie. like these guys come out with a knife. And I swear, I don't know if it's true, but I mean, in my memory, the two guys sort of looked at each other and smiled like, okay, let's do it.
This.
And they just fucking wiped the floor with those guys. It was amazing.
Yeah, like sometimes having the skill of being able to fight really well can be... It's a really nice thing. It can free you up and free you up from fear in a lot of ways.
Well, that was the thing. I mean, obviously they were in great shape and all that. But what I felt watching that happen was, if someone pulls a knife on me, I'm almost going to be paralyzed by fear. Someone pulls a knife on them, they're like, are you kidding? We were getting shot at 3 days ago.
Yeah, and they do probably a lot of knife training, so it's just like a lot of stress inoculation.
Yeah,
so it's,
so it didn't slow them down or
this again.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. I've dealt with this a million times.
Yeah.
Have you had any real hairy kind of experiences along those lines?
I did get stabbed in Thailand. I was I was really drunk coming out of a bar in Bangkok on Coast End Road, actually on the corner of Gulliver's Bar, which is my favorite haunt when I hit that spot. And there was a English guy who had this Thai girl up against the wall and was kind of like, seemed like he was trying to rape her and yelling at her and all this stuff. So I like kind of casually walk over and I'm like, yo, hey, this isn't cool. Like kind of playing up my friendliness and drunkenness so I didn't seem threatening. And the guy swung at me and I grabbed him and put him up against the wall. I have fought a lot. I did a lot of like Muay Thai and Krav Maga and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and have done like training with military guys and stuff. So I ended up putting him up against the wall and like, listen, I don't want to kick your ass. I just want to like see what, and I said, hey, there's some cops right over there. I'm just trying to keep you out of trouble. And then I wasn't paying attention. His friend came up behind me and stabbed me right here. I've got a scar right along my ribs. It didn't go in, so it didn't puncture my lung or anything like that, but basically cut through. And I thought I just got punched really hard. And so I like backed up and I was like, oh, fuck, that hurt. And I look at my hand and I was wearing like a white shirt and just blood all down my shirt and leg and all over my hand. And at that point, I just backed up, and I was like, yo, guys, I don't really want any part of this. Ended up backing up, and luckily there's a police station nearby, and went to the hospital and got stitched up. I had also in Thailand, over Songkran, which is the Buddhist New Year. I was up in Lampang, which is, I've got a kind of a Thai adopted family that's in a village about an hour outside of Lampang, and I was there with all the village boys partying and like in the main town there. And there's no tourists don't go there. I mean, the only thing that tourists go there for, they've got like a horse and carriage rides, but you just don't see a lot of white people there. And I was the only person that I saw. I saw one other white person that whole festival over the course of a couple of days. And at some point, there was a fight between my Thai friends and some other Thai people that were driving by in a car, and apparently someone had thrown a beer bottle into their car. I didn't see any of this, and it wasn't our guys because we were all drinking cans, but everyone's drunk, so no one pays attention to that stuff. I just kind of see the commotion outside that something's going on. Whenever I see something like that, especially when my friends are involved, I go over and I break up fights. Like I don't like go and instigate and talk shit, and someone calls me a faggot, I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever. But yeah, I got right in the middle, and then like basically to them, I was apologizing in Thai and saying, "Hey, Happy New Year! This is no problem. I'm really sorry, my friends are drunk." And to them, I was like, "Hey guys, fuck off! Like let's have a good time. Let's not have a fight here." And they're all yelling at each other. I'm standing right in the middle, and I pushed a couple of these my kids back. These are all like young 20s, and then all of a sudden behind me are a gunshot. And turn around, and the guy that was closest to me, maybe 10 feet away, has this big 44 Magnum pointed up in the air, like yelling in Thai, and I'm not following what he's saying at this point, but you can clearly tell by his body language. He's like, "What's up now, motherfucker? Like, who's the big guy now?" And he wasn't looking at me because I wasn't starting any shit. I was clearly a peacemaker in the situation. Everyone hit the ground, and I'm just standing there totally frozen. I'm like, fuck, what do I even do in this situation? Like, I at first I just kind of thought, am I shot? No, I'm not shot. Is anyone else shot? No, they're not shot. Is he pointing the gun at me? No. So I'm like trying to just kind of go through. Everything slows down like in a fight movie, like everything felt slow. And just continued to apologize. And he ended up backing up, getting in the car and taking off. Everything was fine. There was no... there was no thing further than that. But, we ended up calling the cops, and he could only get, because they're like in a parade of cars moving slowly, they got arrested like 200 yards down the road. They couldn't fucking get away.
Some getaway. A parade chase scene.
After that, I stopped doing sport fighting, and I started learning Krav Maga because they do a lot of weapons disarm stuff. So a lot of knife and stick and firearm disarm. So like I didn't have any framework to work. Like I just froze, like what do you do when someone pulls a knife or tries to beat you with a bat or a chain or pulls a gun on you and puts it to your head? Like unless you practice that kind of stuff over and over and over to the point where it's like, okay, I know what to do, like you can be more calm. But yeah, I mean, otherwise it's paralyzing.
The problem is that, when you get to the point where someone's pulled out a weapon, often it's too late. Because I studied martial arts when I was young, and but I mean really young. I stopped when I was 15 when my teacher killed his father. Oof. Yeah, it was a heavy situation. And so I've sort of, I've thought about that a lot over the years, and why I wanted to study, and a lot of it was what you and I were talking about earlier, that always being the outsider and not feeling safe and not having your community and your buddies to back you up and all that. So because I felt vulnerable and exposed in some way, that made me feel better. But as I look back on it now, after traveling, I kind of feel like, at least for myself, it's like a false sense of comfort, of safety. Because if somebody pulls a gun, like if that guy wanted to shoot you, it doesn't matter what training you have.
Right. No, if someone's standing 15 feet away and nobody's faster than a bullet, no one's bulletproof. But, it's one thing to think you're a badass and walk around with that attitude, because that's dumb.
Yeah.
A lot of times, a lot of the guys that are they're real fighters, they end up looking for fights. They just exude it, when all you've got is a hammer, the whole world looks like a nail kind of thing. And I definitely don't feel like I have that to any degree. I'm like really I want to be able to have skills that can keep myself and my loved ones safe.
Well, and the thing is, I feel like the number one value of the kind of training you're talking about is not that it enables you to disarm someone. It's that if in that situation, you're able to keep calm and say the right thing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Because you're not paralyzed, because you're somewhat familiar with scenarios like that, psychologically you're more able to just do the right thing. And like you say, someone insults you, fine, that's okay. That's okay. Yeah, all right, whatever. Because, you mentioned earlier the thing of my knife in the boot and the guy who picked me up in prison, the prison warden and all that. That really stuck in my head, like, wait a minute, no, I'm not going to defend myself with a knife. If I'm going to defend myself, it's going to be by thinking a little faster and clearer than the other guy.
Yep.
That's really all I can hope for.